Welcome to today's webinar, Approval Ready. Get ahead of filing objections and accelerate approvals. I'm Sam Fetro. I work on the marketing team here at ZestyAI, and I'm joined by two experts on our panel today. Carter Lawrence is the Commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance and is the Tennessee State Fire Marshal. Before becoming commissioner, he served in a variety of leadership roles in the Department of Commerce and Insurance, including as Assistant Commissioner and Chief Operating Officer. And as commissioner, he's advocated for the removal of overly burdensome regulations, improved customer service through the use of better tools, and spearheaded initiatives focused on creating greater efficiencies and employee engagement. Commissioner Lawrence, thanks for being here today. And we also have Bryan Rehor, the Director of Regulatory Strategy at ZestyAI. He has previously held product management and pricing roles at Progressive and Travelers, most recently serving as the product manager for California. And he has extensive experience in collaborating with regulators, ensuring compliance, and advancing the use of AI in the insurance sector. So why is ZestyAI hosting this panel discussion? Well, at ZestyAI, regulatory compliance isn't just a priority, it's foundational. And our risk models have been reviewed and approved for use in over 30 states across 5 different risk categories. How do we achieve this? Well, it starts with proprietary data, and we leverage contributed loss experience from our carrier partners and derive data from aerial imagery, building permits, regulatory filings, and more. And this fuels our risk analytics platform, where we apply advanced computer vision and machine learning to these vast data sets to deliver a system of intelligence that provides regulatory approved risk models covering 85% of all insurance losses by peril. It also delivers deep property-specific insights across 70 features for underwriting, rating, and for reinsurance. And we see the future of efficiency in our agentic AI system of action. And this framework is designed to automate complex, high-value workflows. Today, you'll hear about Zoro Discover, our foundational AI agentic model. Zoro Discover puts regulatory research on steroids, analyzing over 200 million pages of P&C filings from the past decade to turn regulatory complexity into competitive advantage. And because we built this compliance-first framework, we are rapidly deploying agentic AI across the entire P&C value chain, specifically targeting filing submissions, underwriting, and claims to streamline and accelerate those critical operations. So I want to start with an audience poll question. How often do you receive regulator objections or requests for additional information? Maybe it's nearly every filing, or perhaps about half of filings. Maybe it's occasionally or rarely or never. That'd be a very good thing. So let us know where your organization stands, and we'll reveal the results in about 20 seconds. Nearly every filing, about 35%, about half of filings, 38%, occasionally 25%, rarely or never 1%. One person rarely or never gets an objection or request for additional information. So clearly this topic and accelerating approvals is really important with almost 2/3, nearly every filing or over half of filings. So I'm going to turn it over to our panel in just a minute. I wanted to set the stage of what's at stake here. So this is a map of state-by-state filing laws and regulations, typical approval speed, and combined ratio. And I don't need to tell you that it's a complicated environment that's difficult to navigate. And this is just the homeowners market. The other 78 P&C lines each have their own map of rules, approval times, and combined ratios. But I wanted to try to attempt to quantify the cost of a delayed filing. So I'm going to start with homeowners, and then I'll expand to all lines. So if we just look at the $172 billion in direct written premium across homeowners, about 1/3 of that is in prior approval states, just over $50 billion. So we use Zoro Discover to calculate the average rate increase by carrier in those prior approval states. And we found the average rate increase was 8.49%. So over the past 6 months, there have been 147 approved filings in those states, with 110 of them being rate increases. So let's try to quantify the impact of a delay by just a single day. So if you assume that the policies are evenly distributed throughout the year, you take the $51.7 billion in premium times the 8.49% average rate increase and divide by 365 days in the year. That's over $12 million a day. And when you apply that same figure to all P&C lines for prior approval states, $72.8 million a day. So every day a rate filing is delayed, it's extremely costly to the insurance industry. So, with that, let me turn things over to Commissioner Lawrence to share more about Tennessee's approach and get his perspective on how insurance carriers can accelerate approvals.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to be with everyone. It was really fun seeing all of the different titles come in from the participants who are here today. I just have to give a very quick plug, seeing a number of actuaries come in, that it was fairly recently that Commerce Insurance received the legislation that we needed in order to hire our first actuaries. Up until that point, we'd only ever contracted with them. I'm a lawyer, and the joke that a lot of lawyers make is that we go to law school to avoid math, but I've found that in this regulatory world, it's something I can't avoid. So I might as well hire people who really know math. And even if I think of actuaries as wizards of math and I don't fully understand all of it, it's great to have those experts on board. But a little bit about myself as we get started, because I think one of the themes that I'll come back to is that we, the regulators, are people and that relationships matter. I'm a native of Nashville, Tennessee, the area, and other than time in the Chicago suburbs for college and in Knoxville for law school and business school, I've been here my whole life. And I mention that because I think it really matters about understanding the people that we serve. And one of the true strengths, rather than what's sometimes taken as a knock on our system of state-based regulation, is that all of us, as the chief regulators, that we're looking out for. It's my friends, it's my family, it's my neighbors, it's the fellow citizens who I've grown up with, lived with my whole life, and that's who we're focused on serving. But again, like I said, it's an honor to be with y'all, and it's an honor to get to get to do what I do. Commerce Insurance is one of the many other departments of insurance around the country that does a lot more than just insurance. Maybe some interest to the group here. We have 7 external facing divisions. Our big 3 divisions, insurance is certainly the one that takes up most of my time because of the dynamic nature of insurance. We also do professional licensure in our regulatory boards division. So that's accountants, barbers, contractors. We even license boxers and mixed martial artists in the state. It's a long story about how things ended up there. And then the state fire marshal's office is the other big piece of what I do. That was part of my introduction. I just want to bring in a prop here. This is a fire chief's hat, not state fire marshal's hat, but something I was granted, that I was gifted. And I believe that there are 14 other states in which the commissioner is also the state fire marshal. And I don't think I have to tell this group about the historic ties between fire marshals and understanding loss experiences and insurance. And that's the historic connection between those. But we've got a great team, about 850 total positions, about 650 the full-time employees. Our insurance division is around 120. And for those that are keeping track and might follow the NAIC metrics, I'm really proud that we go back and forth between North Dakota as to which is the most efficient division of insurance in the whole country. And that ratio is found at the total amount of premium volume that's written and then the number of employees that work in a given insurance department. And so very proud of that, but not proud of it just because of that number. We're not chasing efficiency just for the sake of it. And that number just to be able to brag about it. Because it wouldn't matter if we didn't turn around our filings properly, if we didn't get to the complaints timely. And I'm really proud of the work that we do while we are trying to balance the best interest of Tennessee consumers and trying to protect a healthy and competitive marketplace. I think we do a good job across those 850 employees of protecting Tennesseans and empowering professionals, which is our mission. And in some way or another, all 7.3 million Tennesseans are directly benefited by the work that we do every single day. So I touched a little bit on what we do as a department. I'd love to take if anyone has any questions for me about any of those other pieces. But maybe let me jump into what's a little bit more germane for today's talking points and talk about what are some of the kind of tips and keys that I could give about trying to make sure that those filings move along timely. I started off by trying to personalize and say, I'm a person, here's a little bit about me. Because we, the regulators, aren't just robots, automatons, instead actual people for whom relationships do matter. And I always tell companies when they're coming in to meet with us that we prefer to meet before there are problems. So I'd like to put a face and a name to a company so that if there is an issue eventually, then we know who it is that we need to reach out to. And it's not just trying to look someone up online to find out who that appropriate contact or to find it in the filing, but to be able to think about, oh yeah, I met with Joe, and Joe's the person we're going to go to get this issue resolved. And the other important piece about those relationships is it gives the opportunity to talk through what it is, what problem has been identified for which there might be a new product. This is a recent example I can think of a company that came to meet with us. And I've got a team of experts who, unlike me, have that deep background in insurance regulation prior to arriving at the department. And they were really surprised to hear about a product idea that no one had heard about before. In fact, it's not something that exists in the United States. So we were really pleased that they came to us first about this particular filing. But the reason I mention that is it's complex. And so we have to understand what the issue is, what they're trying to do, and how that fits within our framework. Because while I think everyone on this call would understand, we as the regulators have a really clear directive. I've got, in my case, Tennessee code annotated that tells me exactly what we have to do, rules that lay it out further, that all fit within the framework ultimately of making sure that insurance companies have the money to pay the claims that they're supposed to pay and that they actually pay those claims when they're supposed to. And all of our regulation ultimately flows from that. All of the complex and esoteric work that happens inside of NAIC is ultimately built towards that. So understanding what the products are and how they fit within that framework is really important for us. I think that relationships are a really important piece of that. But of course, we don't take our approaches on just kind of a relational basis. Of course, we're going through on a metric-driven approach, but we understand that there is a lot of strength that comes from different opinions. And so in Tennessee, the way we've structured is that we have a committee that gets together and reviews our new filings. So that's made up of people in the policy section, in financial, in our consumer insurance services, and they review together corporately, but also individually in order to come up with a recommendation that is then made to the assistant commissioner, that then rises to the deputy commissioner, and ultimately to myself for making the final decision on those. And I think it's really important that we have that approach in order to bring in that vast array of differences and opinions and backgrounds in order to come up with the best possible solution. Now, I say that might sound for some of the folks on here, because I saw some people who put in their title and compliance like an unnecessary hurdle, and that it might slow things down. Well, bear in mind, of course, that we do have our statutory obligations that we have to fulfill about making sure that all of the products are in line with Tennessee law. But even despite that rigorous approach that we take, we are still turning around filings in less than 30 days. In fact, when I last checked, 21.86, I believe, was our average for how quickly we're turning those around. And so despite there were those outliers where we recently had a more than 2,000 page filing, which significantly mucked up our numbers, we are turning things around timely. And so that goes back to what I was talking about with the efficiency that we have with a lean staff, that we're still able to get great things done timely, and really proud of that work. And so that admissions committee that I referenced earlier, we not only do they meet together, but they also have pre-meetings. And that's another component that I don't think is as properly understood and appreciated by companies that are coming to see us, that even before we get to an actual filing, that we are happy to meet with folks in advance in order to work through potential issues so that we can avoid, to the question that you posed for the poll about how often you're getting objections. We don't want objections. Y'all don't want objections. No one does. And by the way, kudos to the one person who never has them. That's phenomenal. I hope that's the experience in Tennessee. You clearly took advantage of the pre-meetings and everything went well with that admissions committee. And so that would be my my advice. And I guess I'll just kind of conclude that section by mentioning that we do have this state-based system of regulation of insurance. I believe that the quote that's attributed the National Federalist level about states being a laboratory of democracy, well, I think that's true for insurance regulation, that we are also a laboratory for what works and what doesn't work. And without trying to pick on any other states, I think many people on this call would know that different states have different approaches. And within the confines of following Tennessee law, the really clear approach that we have taken that I inherited and have tried to lean into even further is making sure that we are letting the market drive decisions, because ultimately nothing is going to protect Tennessee consumers who I care about, who I'm charged by law with caring about, even separate from any relationships that I have. I care about Tennesseans. And if we have a healthy marketplace, then we're not going to have the residuals, and we're not going to have people going to surplus lines, and we're going to have a robust marketplace that's going to serve Tennesseans. And really proud of the state of Tennessee's insurance marketplace. I was just reporting to the governor last week about it and getting to use some of these same talking points and bragging to him. But that happens because of the approach that we have, but also because of the industry side and understanding that Tennessee is a market-driven state and trying to come in and write. And so, the ask that I would make of all the folks on the call is, continue to look to Tennessee for business, for new business, for new filings, because we want to work with you. We want to make sure that Tennessee remains a competitive marketplace for the benefit of our citizens across the state. So I believe we've got a slide that shows about Tennessee's leadership. A lot of the terms that we use are meaningless to people outside of government, but as commissioner, it means that I'm a member of the governor's cabinet. I serve entirely at his pleasure. I guess I could be fired if I wore the wrong color tie. Fortunately, that hasn't happened to me yet. But underneath me, the leadership is at a deputy commissioner who's got multiple divisions. And so some folks on this call might know Bill Huddleston from his decade plus at the department. And he was previously the assistant commissioner for insurance. And that's the position where really the rubber meets the road. So Scott McAnally is a true professional, probably one of the brighter minds, specifically on health policy, which is his background. And while he's relatively new into his direct role, he's been at the Department of Commerce and Insurance for about 4 years. And for many years before that, he was working on health policy matters. And we've got a phenomenal team, a lot more folks that I don't have time to mention. But I would encourage everyone on this call I'd finish where I started. It's about relationships. And so reach out. We are here to help for the benefit of Tennessee consumers, and would love to hear from any of y'all. So I think that concludes it for me. Happy to take questions as we get into that time later on, and I'll turn it back over with my gratitude for the time that I had to speak with everyone. So back over to you, Sam.
That was great, Commissioner Lawrence. Thank you so much. And insurance commissioners are real people. They're people too. I think it's just super helpful to hear sort of go under the hood of what really happens at an insurance commissioner's office and the time and deliberation and the care that you put into it. So really appreciate you sharing that. Okay, so now let me turn it over to Bryan and let's get the ZestyAI perspective. Bryan, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thank you, Sam. And thanks to everybody who's joining us today. My name is Bryan Rehor. I've probably worked with a few of you on this call, but I'm the Director of Regulatory Affairs for ZestyAI. And I'm really excited today to dive into a topic that every carrier wrestles with, including myself as a former product manager. And that's getting filings approved quickly, cleanly, and consistently. And over the past few years, I feel that regulatory complexity has really increased. Filings are longer, objections are a lot more technical, DOIs are really digging in. But I think the good news is at the same time, we have more public information and more regulatory content than ever before. Thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of filings, objection letters, bulletins, insurance statutes. So that's where our broader vision at ZestyAI comes in. So we believe the future of insurance operations will be powered by intelligent systems that will completely revolutionize the industry, not just for filings, but for all aspects. I'm talking about underwriting, claims, inspections, and many other areas. And Zorro is our first step towards that future. So it's a platform designed to read, understand, and operationalize regulatory language at scale. So we can use Zorro to help us anticipate issues, to help us avoid filing errors, and really become approval ready. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. But Zorro is all aspects of the insurance operations. So with that context, let's start by looking at what some recent filings can tell us about the most common objection themes. So like I mentioned, publicly available filings are just an absolute goldmine of information. I'm sure the other product managers on the webinar today will agree. You're probably looking at, what kind of objections are coming up in my state? What are the common themes? So now, thanks to Zoro, we can process that information at scale. And aspirationally, we don't just learn from it. We can actually predict and prevent what the most common issues are before they even happen. So let's just take Tennessee as an example. We analyzed some recent homeowners filings to understand what is really holding things up when they do happen. Tennessee seems to be a very efficient state, but when things do happen, what are the causes for delays? Single most common issue is something called checklist item 10, which is an actuarial exhibit. It usually means there's some missing or incomplete actuarial support. If you really drill down into it, missing things like unity exhibits, investment income support. So in other words, these are mechanical misses that can easily be caught before submission. So next common theme, predictive models. Departments like Tennessee and many other departments across the country are asking, has this model been filed and justified? And even if a carrier is using a third party, regulators still expect that transparency. That's why ZestyAI has invested so much into our rate service organization, where we proactively file our risk models with departments of insurance. We provide all that documentation and transparency upfront. Another common theme, rating factors. This is coming up a lot. Regulators always need to see clear database rationale for new and revised discounts and surcharges. Nothing new. Procedural gaps is another one. So using the wrong checklist, for example, using the wrong filing type, forgetting a fee. All of these are avoidable, but they are causing those objection delays. The final one that we've noticed, catastrophe assumptions are getting even more scrutiny. Makes sense given the rising catastrophe costs around the country. Departments really want to understand how cat loads, how catastrophe trends, how reinsurance costs are being reflected into your rate changes. So now, when we zoom out nationally, we see that the same types of themes repeat. It doesn't matter what state you're looking at, we're seeing the same themes: incomplete actuarial support, missing model documentation, and procedural packaging errors like outdated checklists or missing notices. So things that can be prevented. And the takeaway here is that a lot of objections are preventable. And with LLM-powered filing QA, such as what Zoro offers, we can catch them before the filing even hits surf. And that matters the most in prior approval states, where every round of objections can add months to the approval process. That's millions of dollars lost in the industry, as Sam shared earlier. So let's take a look at what that impact actually looks like. So in a few states, for those unfamiliar, insurers operate under a prior approval system. That means rate changes or product updates can't actually take effect until the Department of Insurance explicitly signs off on them. So in that environment, speed matters. A delayed approval doesn't just mean administrative overhead. It means that the actuarially necessary rate increases and rate changes can be sitting idle for months, in some cases for years. So what we did is we used Zoro Discover to analyze homeowners rate filings in prior approval states to try to understand what is the relationship between objections and the overall approval time from the day the filing is submitted until the day the filing is approved. And what we found, after the first objection, each subsequent objection that's received adds 2 months to the clock. An incomplete or a partial response can add another 2 or 4 months. And across all filings, the single most common avoidable cause of delay that Zoro found was missing exhibits. So when you put all of that together, it's easy to see how delays can compound. More objection rounds cause exponential delay. And the key insight here is a lot of these are operational issues. They're not disagreements about the substance of the filing. And that's what's really important to keep in mind here. Filing and response quality alone can be the difference between a 1-month approval and a 6-month approval. And again, the good news is we can avoid and control a lot of this. We can eliminate compliance misses before the filing is even submitted by using AI-powered QA. We can target quicker responses using AI platforms such as Zoro to draft, to review, to cross-reference your objection responses against past DOI correspondence, which can shave days or even weeks off the process. And then finally, we can ensure that our filing is complete and our objections are complete by auditing before submission. So catching missing exhibits or catching explanations that might be missing some key information. So altogether, these are small levers, but altogether they can have huge financial impact, especially in prior approval states. We can accelerate rate approvals, we can reduce that churn, and that means millions of dollars of value returned to the industry and also value returned to the DOIs in terms of reduced workload. So I think that's what the promise of being approval ready is, and the promise of Zoro is using technology to bring a lot more rigor and speed to the filing process overall.
That was great. Thank you, Bryan. Love the data behind what's actually going on when a filing gets delayed. That was great. So let's move into our panel discussion. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see our panelists a little clearer. So let me get that going. So we're going to have 3 questions for our panelists, and then we're going to take all your Q&A questions as well. So you can start entering those questions, as I've already seen a few come through. So the first question up: how can carriers proactively address issues that regulators tend to flag? Maybe I'll turn it over to Commissioner Lawrence first and then over to Bryan. You talked a little bit about this in your intro, but would love to get your perspective on how carriers can proactively address some of these issues.
Yeah, that's great. So I think harkening back to one of the points that I made, was about having those conversations in advance. So what you just heard from Bryan were some of the items, like the actuarial checklist, for example. That's a relatively easy, like that's just, don't miss that one, make sure you include it. But when we're considering other items that could be identified and addressed in advance, then that is a pretty significant time save. And from the information that you gave earlier about the financial impact, and then what Bryan was talking about from the time component, then those are pieces that, to Bryan's point, we want, as the department, we want those to be addressed before they ever even get to us, so that we don't have to go back and forth. Because, like I mentioned, Commerce Insurance, Tennessee Department of Commerce Insurance, that we are a pretty lean team, and, comparative to the rest of the country, the leanest. And that means that we've got to make a lot of work happen with relatively few people. And so we really do appreciate that advanced work that's going into it. And so that work, that prep that can go into it is key. And so I would just go back to that about reaching out and taking advantage of the opportunities to have conversations with our team before you ever get to the point of objections being raised.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Lawrence. Bryan.
Yeah, I think the key here is build that awareness into the workflow itself. Don't react to it after the fact through the objections process. So like I just shared, and what we found with Zoro Discover is that objections are stemming from the same avoidable issues. Not all of them, but some of them. So those misses, those incomplete rationales, or missing documentation. So those are the things that we have are in control to address proactively. And using AI-based platforms to cross-check your filing against historic correspondence, against other carrier filings, and also against current checklist items or current requirements from the state before the filing is submitted. That's the first one. And also incorporating feedback from filings. A lot of times questions that are being asked are kind of the same questions. And if you look for common themes, you can start to learn about, what is making regulators tick in this state? What are they most interested about? What are things that they want to hear about? And you can, include that content up front rather than waiting for the question. So all these things can help shrink the objection process and speed the time to approval. So overall, being more proactive and using the tools and the platforms to do that.
Great. Thanks, Bryan. Let's go to our second panel question. We'll start with Commissioner Lawrence again. We talked about what you should do. Is there anything you should stop doing as a carrier to reduce unnecessary friction?
Yeah, how about dropping a 2,000-page filing on us and then saying that they'd really appreciate if we could turn it around in 2 weeks? A little flippant. That actually is a real example, though. And 2,000 pages. I saw the question, and I'm sure we'll get back to that about AI and what tools could be out there. But that's actually real people have to read that. And so we separated it up, broke it out between team members, and then did kind of a holistic review in order to make sure that, again, we're staying within the confines of Tennessee law, protecting our consumers, but working as expeditiously as possible to turn those around. So that's a great example. I could also point to examples where someone has a filing that's really more of an idea. It's not yet a fully formed baked cake, so to speak. And they just kind of throw it out there. And then it's almost like they're iterating with us as the regulator to get to the final solution. And that's frankly a complete waste of everyone's time. It's a waste of my staff's time, just like it's going to be a waste from the company side. And so the encouragement there would be to come up with that fully baked cake before you're coming to us. And yes, with, for example, the tools that have been discussed, but in the relationships. But I think it's really important that that is in a formed process and ready to go for us by the time it gets to us, so that it's not unnecessary slow from anyone's perspective. So those are two recent ones that are kind of top of mind from, unfortunately, real world examples that we've dealt with.
Thanks, Commissioner Lawrence. Turn it over to Bryan. What should carriers stop doing?
Yeah, one thing that I've noticed is providing what can be considered the bare minimum of information and expecting to kind of fill in the gaps as the filing goes along. You can certainly do it in that way. That's definitely not the most efficient use of time because regulators are having to spend time on that incomplete filing, and they have to ask the questions, and that's just using up resources. It's also using up resources on the carrier side because these things take time to do. So providing more information upfront rather than less is actually more of a best practice that we hope that the industry will start to move towards. I think also using kind of boilerplate language and filing it in every state without really understanding what the state is looking for, what the regulations are in a specific state. And then finally, and I know Commissioner Lawrence hit on this, is treating the regulatory engagement as adversarial. So us versus them mentality rather than building that relationship. So transparency and completeness are the fastest ways to earn trust and faster approvals. And that trust needs to be established up front in order for the entire system to work more efficiently. So stop treating it as an us versus them. This is why ZestyAI invests so much in regulatory support and builds those relationships across the countries, because we know that translates into more trust and ultimately faster approvals.
Awesome. Thanks, Bryan. Last prepared question, and then we'll get into your Q&A from our audience. Maybe we could start with Bryan here and then go to Commissioner Lawrence. Laws are always changing, Bryan. Regulations, bulletins, DOI rules. How should a carrier prepare its filings to stay compliant?
Yeah, so it is a moving target. That's definitely one of the challenges of running an efficient product organization is having to deal with rules that are consistently changing. So I'm going to zoom out a bit and kind of talk where the future is headed. So we believe that the future of insurance operations is one where AI serves as sort of a connective tissue across the entire enterprise. So underwriting, claims, inspections, regulatory filings, and products. So this is why our vision of Zorro expands just beyond the filing research use case. We truly believe that Zorro is going to revolutionize the way that the insurance industry operates from all aspects. So in today's world, to your question, Sam, in today's world, carriers are, for the most part, manually scanning for regulatory changes. So having to look at the website for any new bulletins, it's just an inefficient process. So now with Zorro, we are building a way to basically continually monitor all of the regulatory material that's out there, laws, regulations, bulletins, and if there's changing, being able to notify you of that change and add it to your in-house library of insurance regulations. So imagine a world where you're able to continuously scan and interpret new laws and regulations and forecast the impact on your operations across all 50 states and maintain that living library. And then also imagine being able to run a pre-submission review of your filing against that living library and see if there's any gaps, see if there's any potential pitfalls down the road, see if there's any information that needs to be addressed up front and try to reduce the amount of potential objections. So this is kind of our vision of the future with Zorro. And when carriers take this approach, it goes from being a reactive exercise to a proactive exercise. And it really becomes a competitive advantage for your carrier and a stepping stone to becoming a truly AI-enabled operation.
Thanks, Bryan. That's a different future. I love it. Let me turn it over to Commissioner Lawrence. Same question to you. Laws, regulations, bulletins, a lot of moving parts. How can carriers prepare their filings to really stay compliant?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me back up a little bit, just talking about laws and our rules and the bulletins, and just give a really brief bit of information and what that means for commerce and insurance here in Tennessee. So I am appointed by the governor, as I mentioned earlier, and what that means in Tennessee, which is different from some other states, is that I don't have my own legislation. Our governor has legislation, and I can ask him for legislation for which he'll say yes or no. Now, when it comes to something that's NAIC accreditation related, then the answer is going to be yes, at least within the time frame that it's required in order to make sure that it happens, because we all understand the importance of NAIC accreditation and what that means. In the distant past, Tennessee once lost it. And while those folks are gone from Tennessee who were a part of that, we all understand, you can look at some of the other states recently that have had accreditation issues. It really matters. It matters for their consumers. It matters for their companies. It's something that's really important. But so I don't have the ability to run my own laws. Now, if the governor says, yes, I'm signing off on this, then it is the responsibility of my department, and we have a legislative team, and we work those in order to make sure that they're successful. So we also have the rules, because I think, as most people on the call would understand, a law will often be somewhat vague, and then it's the onus on us as the department to flesh out via rule what is intended and what actual compliance looks like. So that's very prescriptive, and it's a lengthy process. In fact, it takes about a year for us to promulgate rules. It's a period in which we are getting sign off from the governor's office, from the attorney general's office. There's also a comment period, which, while it might sound rote, is actually really important. And we welcome and solicit feedback in order to understand what the impact of our rules are. Because while I mentioned the phenomenal team that we have and the resources that we're able to bring in, the perspective of an individual producer, for example, or of a company is going to be illustrative for us in understanding what the impact of the rules are. And we're actually required to respond to those comments by rule. And then finally, our rules get approved by our legislative body. And it's different, of course, in every state. And then kind of at that lowest level of regulation are the bulletins, in which we are able to provide a little bit more color for fleshing out even further what the rules could look like. So the most recent bulletin that I've put out is on aerial imagery, and that it cannot be a sole data source that's used from underwriting. And that's a pretty vanilla bulletin, frankly. I don't think that's happening a lot, but we wanted to make sure that it's not, in order to protect our consumers and make sure that there's compliance with Tennessee laws. So this all ultimately flowing up to the laws. So like you mentioned, Sam, it is dynamic. It's always changing. And while that's difficult, it's necessary, because we see a lot of developments, like this AI piece that I presume we're going to talk about when I look over at the chat. And so we have to stay abreast of those, and that we have to make sure that we keep our regulatory framework fresh and responsive. And even though it's more difficult, it's the right thing to do. So from a company side, yeah, that's a lot of work, because as we all know, ignorance of the law is no excuse. And so some company could say, I'm sorry, I didn't know that that was Tennessee law. From my perspective as the regulator, while there might be some discretion about what it could mean as far as penalties go, the actual application of the law is clear. You have to follow Tennessee law. And so, when I saw all the folks who listed their titles who work in compliance or state relations, that's really important. And I would presume that there are a lot of people who might have traditionally written scripts in order to understand what an individual DOI is putting out and aggregate it, that there is a greater sophistication of the tools that exist now to try and bring that about. And the work that trade associations do in keeping their members abreast are important. But I'm, like I mentioned, I'm a lawyer, so many of y'all have heard the jokes about belts and suspenders. I think that's always appropriate because, like I mentioned, ignorance of the law is no excuse, and you've got to make sure that you're staying compliant with with those jurisdictions.
Awesome. Love that overview of sort of the landscape there. Thank you so much, Commissioner Lawrence. Okay, now we're going to get to your questions. So I'm going to share my screen again. So open up that Zoom Q&A and you can enter your question. We already have a few in here, and so we should be able to get through all of these. While you're getting your questions in, I did want to invite you to go ahead and register for our next webinar, The Hidden Redesign of P&C Insurance. And so we'll look under the hood of P&C insurance and just see exactly how is coverage changing, what is the impact to consumers, to the competitive landscape. That's coming up in January. So snap the QR code, enter the Bitly link, and save your spot. Okay, panel, are you ready? Here we go. AI is a hot topic. So this question is, I'm curious whether the panel sees AI as a threat or an opportunity in the filing process. On one hand, it can make it easier to digest any filing, particularly if they're 2,000 pages long. On the other hand, it could be dangerous to trust AI summaries. Panel, I'll turn it over to you.
Yep, I can jump in. AI is top of mind for me, particularly as yesterday afternoon I had a lengthy Tennessee AI Council meeting, of which I'm an ex officio member just from serving here as the Commissioner of Commerce and Insurance. And, the question was, is it a threat or is it an opportunity? It really is both of those things. And so I did just, first at a high level, I have some kind of philosophical concerns about the societal impacts of AI and what it can mean for us and what might the job loss look like and some of the retooling that could happen. That's kind of one piece of it. And then I think about from my actual work, my Commissioner of Commerce and Insurance hat. And I'm really excited about it because my obligation is to return the best possible return for the people of Tennessee. And so one of the ways that looks like is we operate a call center. And something like round up to 80% of the phone calls that we receive in that call center are people asking about the status of their license. And so that small call center, it's only 17 people, but that's a lot of what they're taking. And so we are in the process of setting up an AI project that will be able to automate that so that we've got an AI agent that's able to answer those questions, that really high volume question, so that we can move our real people agents into those greater complexity questions where someone might be asking a question with greater nuance. And that's exactly the sort of thing that I want to see applied across the department, because we serve significantly more people now than we used to with fewer actual employees. So I mentioned when I was starting out that we serve 7.3 million Tennesseans. When my remarks were prepared, we had 7.2 million people that were listed in the talking points. But we are growing rapidly. I think we're the 6th fastest growing state. I just had to join my executive leadership team, the comptroller for the state of Tennessee, who, interestingly enough, is the repository for the United States census data, excuse me. And so he shared with our team that number, the 7.3 million. And I don't want to grow the size of commerce and insurance. Now, I have to respond to those pieces that we're statutorily required to do. I want to do it in the most timely manner. The way to do that is for us to bring to bear technologies. So in the same way that 10 years ago, we moved from a paper-based system to an electronic system, this is that next step for us. And I think it's going to be really significant. It's not just ultimately going to be kind of the lower skill, for lack of a better term, phone center work, but it ultimately will be a tool that will be used from, say, our financial analysts who are doing solvency monitoring work. And that's some of the things that are really exciting for me. The important piece, and anyone who's listened to NAIC experts talk about it know that the important component will always be to have a human in the loop. And what we're never going to outsource is the actual decision making. It should only be a tool to amplify and to augment. And I think that that is what we are baking into the state of Tennessee and to Commerce and Insurance in order to allow our already efficient employees to even be more so and to do even more with less and try and turn better results for the people of Tennessee.
Thanks, Mr. Lawrence. Bryan, do you want to weigh in? AI, threat or opportunity?
Yeah, I think it's an absolute opportunity if implemented mindfully. And what I mean by that, and I was going to mention human in the loop, Commissioner Lawrence just mentioned that, but it needs to be done mindfully. So when we build AI platforms and products as ZestyAI, we always want to make sure that humans have a part in the decision process. So for risk models, what that means is being able to explain what the top drivers of a property's risk score are and be able to deliver that information directly to the customer, and also giving them the opportunity to appeal incorrect or missing information or updated information. So that's how we have human in the loop for our risk models. When it comes to Zorro, what we do is we make sure that every time we return a response about filings, we make sure that the source is cited and that you can easily get to the source information and be able to verify that that information is correct. Because, as many of you know, large language models, they've come so far in the past 3 years. They do hallucinate from time to time, and this will improve over time. But it's important to make sure that if you are using an LLM-based tool to draft your objection responses, your carrier is going to fully own whatever is submitted to the department, including any incorrect or misstated information. So having a human, fully verify the accuracy of any information that the tool is creating is extremely important. But if we are implementing this mindfully into our operations, it does greatly reduce the amount of time to draft responses and to create those filings, which overall is a huge opportunity for carriers.
Thanks, Bryan. I have a couple questions here for Commissioner Lawrence. I might hit a couple rapid fire to you. I think people are enjoying getting to ask questions directly to a regulator, so this is cool. The question is from Sally. Do other state DOIs reach out to you for advice on how to be more efficient, or how do you interact with your 50 colleagues across the different states?
Yeah, great question. So I mentioned earlier the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, which is that large organization to which we all belong. We get together regularly in order to talk about the facilitation of nationwide standards so that we can have the healthy insurance marketplace that we all want. Separate from that, though, we're broken out into zones. Of course, Tennessee belongs to the Southeast zone. And for geographic and demographic reasons, it's usually within the Southeast zone that we have the most robust discussion about things that are similarly impacting us. And while we don't have the same coastal exposure as a Florida or a Georgia, we do have a lot of other similar issues that we deal with. And so there's a lot of collaboration that we have. And so when I mentioned earlier the recent bulletin that I put out, it was actually from West Virginia that I got that idea after a Southeast Zone meeting that we had. And the commissioner in West Virginia shared his experience and why he had done that. And while I hadn't yet had some of the problems that had emerged in West Virginia, I wanted to get ahead of those and promulgate that bulletin, which is why I put it out. And final, I just want to put in a plug, as you mentioned about commissioners. I saw that Commissioner Gaffney is coming up. Not only is he a great guy and a good friend, but also a phenomenal regulator. And so would encourage, I don't know if he's taking questions, but he is one of the best. I would encourage people to stick around for him.
Thanks, Mr. Lawrence. Another one for you. You talked about the rules, how they're different from the legislation, how they're different from the bulletins. maybe this is more of a comment, but would love your response to this. A lot of times there isn't a lot of time before they become active, and there might be questions from carriers and require clarification. And it might not be a lot of time to get those answers back before they take effect. So, any comments on that situation carriers find themselves in?
Yes. So first, if it's law, the effective date is completely outside of our control. Now, usually, if the law is going to require the promulgation of rules, the legislative body, which for us is the General Assembly, will take that into account, and they might make an effective date of, say, July 1, and then give a rulemaking date that corresponds with it. This creates a lot of kind of technical challenges for us where we have to pass emergency rules, which is kind of its own bear and probably further into the weeds than most folks on this call would want to go. Rules, the time frame is such that if we're not talking about emergency rules, but a permanent rules package, the length of time through which it works is, and there's so many hands on it that it can be somewhat outside of our control about getting a timely, effective date on them. Which is why it's really important for us to get the comments that I referenced earlier, so that if there was going to be some issue that was raised around the timing of the rules, that we would be aware of it and could take into account in the process itself what that would look like, and can amend those rules as it works through the process in order to not create some unintended consequences.
Thanks, Commissioner Lawrence. All right, Bryan, I have a question for you. This is from Mona. How do you think about it within Zorro regulations that are proposed versus the ones that are passed? And what do you think about, like, if you try to take a proposal and then how does the liability work if they change or the rules haven't been published yet? How would Zorro think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and it is a challenge, for other themes as well, such as kind of looking back at past filings and being able to decipher, well, what rules or rates were overwritten with new rules and rates. So this is what we are training Zorro to understand: is what is the most current information as of today, be able to distinguish that from expired or outdated information, and also be able to keep that distinguished from what is proposed or drafted but not yet in force. So it is a kind of top of mind right now, and the team is doing an excellent job right now of being able to kind of train Zorro to understand what is current versus what is outdated. But yeah, absolutely something that Zorro is learning to do.
Thanks, Bryan. Well, we have one more question, and I know Commissioner Lawrence, you have a very busy day. Appreciate you taking the time to do this with us. So I'll pose this to both panelists. This might be more venting. This is Daniel. Sometimes it feels like regulators intentionally delay rate increases and nitpick and look for objections to raise. How can a carrier accelerate their approval, facilitate approval when it feels like that's the case?
I guess I can start this off since I've batted first for most of the questions, and let Bryan come in as cleanup. Yeah, you're probably not wrong. I mean, I did mention the personal nature and that regulators are people. And while that's not good, that probably is the case. In fact, I don't want to pick on any other states. I don't think that's appropriate for me to do. But I am aware of some examples in other states where there have been attempts to delay rate increases because no one likes rate increases. The truth is, like, I'm a consumer myself. And in fact, just as a kind of funny aside, I had my first ever experience of a non-renewal, which was an interesting thing to navigate. And there's a certain amount of understanding that you get when you personally walk through an experience that isn't otherwise evident when you're just looking at what the rules lay out about notice requirements. So, but at the personal level, I don't like paying higher rates, but when we're talking about affordability and availability, I value more my ability to go and get insurance. And that I value more having a healthy marketplace versus having one with artificially depressed rates that could ultimately lead to decisions from companies not to write in my state. I can promise you it's not something that happens in Tennessee, but I suspect it might happen elsewhere. And I think, the answer to that would be a clear demonstration as to the need and a metric-driven approach to show the validity for it. And as we all talk about, that ultimately, two things: that paying claims, but the ability to pay claims, and those solvency metrics that are absolutely critical. And so that would be my takeaway if there is a barrier that's hit that way, which would be really unfortunate. Hope it wouldn't happen, shouldn't happen, but to take a non-personal response to it and instead let the numbers and the metrics guide the conversation from there.
Bryan, anything to add?
Yeah, and I'm not going to theorize on whether this practice actually happens out in the marketplace. What I will say is the more questions that get asked, it's more of a signal of that the regulator doesn't trust what the carrier is trying to pass in their market. So to my earlier point, building that upfront trust before the filing even gets submitted is key. Explaining what the changes are and why they're necessary is also important, because at the end of the day, regulators have to balance affordability with availability. They need to make sure that insurance is affordable for the average customer, because it does support a healthy real estate market for homeowners insurance. But at the same time, they need to make sure that carriers are able to do business in the state, and they can only do that if the rates that they're able to set in the state are actuarially justified or actuarially sound. So that balance can be achieved, I believe, through that upfront trust and explaining what is the end impact to the customer. What does this mean for the average homeowner? And then also, why are these changes needed to keep me as a carrier, as a healthy carrier that's able to do business for the long term in the state?
Thanks, Bryan. Our panel, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the transparency and being willing to do this. So, Commissioner Lawrence, Bryan, thank you so much. We're at time. So there were a few questions that came in at the very end. If you use your name, we'll follow up with you at the end of the webinar. And we have Bryan and Commissioner Lawrence's contact information below, and you can feel free to reach out to them. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure to grab those resources we shared and share your feedback after the session. We'd love to hear what you thought. So thank you so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.